Welcome to the same room. Welcome back to the same room. On this episode, we're going to piggyback off on the conversation we had with Dr. Caroline Leaf, the incredible neuroscientist and best-selling author, as well as Amber Riley, the beautiful actress who is best known for her recurring role on Glee and most recently Tyler Perry's Nobody's Fool. Now, we left you speaking about Brainwashed. Are we conditioned to fail? On part 2 of this conversation, we're going to be speaking about getting back to the real you. And it's going to be practical wisdom. You don't want to miss this. So today we're going to be talking about how to get back to the truest version of ourselves. You know, what I loved about part 1 of this episode is that we discussed about the different ways that we have been conditioned to almost live below our God-given potential. And so with this, we're going to talk about more practical steps on how we heal and how we get back to that perfect you, as a book that you've written.
Yeah.
I know, Amber, earlier in the first part of this episode, you touched on your anxiety. How did you, just to recap, how did you get to the other side of it, your healing journey? What was that like for you?
Well, I'm definitely still in it.
That's beautiful.
You know, because anxieties come and,
Yeah.
you know, and all of that. And a lot of my reactions were habitual. But I got to a point where it started affecting me physically and really actually started affecting my voice.
Wow.
While I was singing, I was getting stones and things on my
vocal cords.
My vocal cords really bad.
Wow.
And it was literally just because of anxiety. There was no other reason that I should have been getting strep or whatever the case, or tonsillitis that much. I was getting it like every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks.
And
Like,
vocal nodules.
and nodules. And it was literally because, so I had to get to a point where, okay, this isn't working. This medication and all of that is not working. How do I how do I actually heal as opposed to medicate? Because Medicaid is numbing. That's all that it was doing for me. So I had to get to a point of awareness and take responsibility and understand. And I was trying to find and understand what was actually happening, because getting a diagnosis and getting medication doesn't explain anything. It's just putting a name on what's happening.
That's
now you just
right.
have a
That makes you
name.
feel
How did
worse.
that naturally occur in your body?
What do you mean? How is it
No, I'm saying that even when you talk about to find out what was
yes.
happening, to find out how did this start,
Yeah,
what
and
was the trace?
honestly, I do not even remember how I found her on YouTube. I really don't know. I can't to this day
amazing.
remember.
It's amazing.
But I mean, I'll just say it was a God thing for me. It was
Yeah.
like that aha moment that I came to, where like researching and understanding, having that thirst for knowledge, understanding, because I'm a nerd anyway, and I like to read books and I like
Yeah.
to watch lectures, and like it's just a natural inclination for me to just want to read about things. So getting to that place, it was that dealing with it physically, and it affecting my livelihood at this point, and finding real help and understanding that it's going to be a journey and it's going to be work.
Yeah.
Because it's not instantaneous.
Yeah.
You
No
know?
quick fix.
That's why I say I haven't arrived. You know,
Yeah.
I can't really, I can tell
But
you
you know,
what
the journey
worked
almost
for me.
the
It's
journey
so
almost
good.
seems to me as the place of arrival. That when you're on that journey, because I don't even think there's anything in life where we arrive to. I think that the moment that we begin the journey, whether it's healing, whether it's awareness, whatever it is, that the journey is that point of arrival to me. Because even just like when we talk about, you know, the God that we serve, he's endless. There is no destination to him. And I
good.
think that mirrors life, that there is no actual destination for healing or destination for this, you know, there's the fact that you begin the journey is the place of arrival. So I love that it's still a healing process for you, because even Dr. Leaf, can someone realistically say that I am at my, you know, I've reached the greatest place I'll ever be in healing or
No.
in wholeness? No.
I don't believe they can. I don't
Yeah.
believe just I think the biggest thing that can block us is having goals.
Yeah.
Because
That's
the
good.
goals are like this, and then you forget all about the process, which is the ongoing thing. And I talk about the perfect you being a blueprint. and a blueprint that, it's a lifelong blueprint that you're constantly learning to, a blueprint being the blueprint of a home or something like that.
Yeah.
It takes forever, and you keep adding and changing, and you build it this way and you add, and so it is a continual thing. So it shouldn't be the goal that should be driving us. It should be the process that should be driving us.
I love that.
So then being anxiety free is not a good goal, but going through the process of forget the word goal. We're so goal orientated that it's keeping us blocked. Go into the process, and the process is something that we need to enjoy, because the process then is the ability for us to see there's endless possibilities.
Yeah.
The glass is half full. There's there's so much more expectation. There's so much more, the little tiny each day, the tiny bit of progress.
Because even the whole concept
Exactly.
of goals or destination, it takes us away from being present in the
Exactly.
moment until we're trying to
powerful, yeah.
achieve this goal, and then we lose sense of self, and we
Yes.
lose presence, and then I think that's where these toxic thoughts start coming, because then you start comparing yourself
Yeah.
to where am I to where my goal is.
Exactly, and there's
Yeah.
this fluid, this like vacuum in between, and then in that process we compare because someone else is doing it differently. Meanwhile, you'd make a lousy someone else.
Right.
So we need to live in the nowness, because if you look at quantum physics, for example, it really helps us understand eternity. And God is eternal, we are eternal, and love is eternal. And I often talk about godness and loveness, so that we don't make something that's so big too small to try and fit in our little boxes. But if we go vast and beyond that, we realize
Yeah.
that if this power of God created present, past and future, as that means that there isn't actually, it blends. So nowness is very important.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned the word
Yeah.
nowness, we need to live in the nowness. Not
Because
that
I
you-
even
not
believe
you
that
forget
God
about
is
the future,
in
but
an
it's-
eternal now.
Exactly, that's the eternal
He's
now.
always,
how I feel.
He's in the now
Yes.
all the time.
I could name it, but yes, yeah, that's a good point.
And when you pray, for example, when you think of the future or something like that, and you're praying for the future, or you're praying for your kids, or you're praying for something that's going to happen, or something, you are actually in essence, bringing the future into the present.
Yeah.
And the future then changes the past. And we have this nowness is a very different commodity to a goal of space and time, where you've got to walk like this. We need to get away from that, and we need to get more bigger in our vision about ourselves.
I
And
love that.
and that's all part of awareness.
I
It's all
love
part
that.
of. But within that, we need our little rituals. Within that, we need our techniques. And that's where science is very, very powerful. Science
Yeah.
shows us that we live in the nowness, but science also shows us that renewing of the mind is very doable, that you're very powerful, that your brain's brilliant, that your brain is only as brilliant as your mind is operating in its brilliance. And so therefore, we need to make our brain operate at its optimal level. And that's some of the research that I've done, is how if thoughts are real, and if we've got to manage our mind that manages everything else, what is the result of mind? Thoughts. So mind produces thoughts.
Yeah.
Thoughts produce actions. So what you said it actually earlier on, what you say and what you do, what's in you is going to come out of you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
coming from your thoughts. So if we can understand how a thought builds, and if we can then realize that in my awareness and in my gathering this awareness and in my reconceptualization, all these fancy words and all this nowness, all this almost philosophical stuff, what's the practical side of that? And that's what I wanted to find for my patients and for people in places, including myself, my family, all the people that I could help. How do you do all this philosophical great stuff that we all know we should be doing? What do you, like you said, what do you do? What are the
really
steps?
admire your study and your research, especially when it comes to, because it's not even far-fetched. It's actually simple.
It's very
simple.
It's
Very
more. It's
simple.
easier than
It's
trying
really
to
simple.
go on.
Well, she made it simple.
Right.
It's not simple, but her gift was making it
You
simple.
know, I agree. Because when you talk about the mind, because we think, like, we know the thoughts that we think about, we know the emotions, we know the triggers when we're around certain things, when we look at certain things. And what I love about that is because you talk about how the mind has the power to do for the brain what medication cannot do.
Exactly.
And I love that, because when you talked about medication just being like numb, almost like a numbness,
Which
not
is what
even
they do. They're
effective.
anesthetic, they're brain disabling, basically.
And I think that, a lot of people watching this don't even realize that a lot of these, antidepressants that are actually
Anti-anxiety,
advertised to heal are causing more brain
Yeah, they're
damage.
not healing anything.
Yeah.
That's a complete and utter fallacy. They're not scientific. They don't heal. They simply numb. So that if you're in a
Wow.
really bad place, the numbing, you may feel better for a season or a time or a week or a day. But the addiction that they cause, because they're very addictive, and the side effects which you would have experienced,
Wow.
I'm
With
sure you
that.
got.
Yeah, you
and the
did.
withdrawal is terrible, and patients are not given enough information about that.
Wow.
But that's why it can't be medical.
So it becomes an addiction
It's
to
very addictive.
feel numb.
I mean, you have to
Yeah.
wean yourself
Off.
off of it.
Yeah.
Very, very
You can't
carefully.
just stop
no,
it.
No, you will get so sick
Yeah.
and
You get really
suicidal
sick.
and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, you
I
can't.
have one story that I always tell people. I was on a particular medication, and I touched was doing my hair, and I touched a curling iron, and I had almost no reaction to it.
You're joking.
Yeah, that's one of the
And it
things
was
you
hot.
can.
It was
yeah,
hot. My
that's
hand
one of-
burned, and I went
Yeah, that's one of the side effects of anti-anxiety medications.
completely
where
no reaction to it.
It numbs your. It
Wow.
actually goes. It's an anesthetic, so it numbs your pain sensors. So that's one of the side effects that can happen.
And so really that's just a blanket.
It's a blanket.
Just
It's a
blanket.
chemical blanket, and it's not helping
Wow.
person deal with the issues. But the fact is that something has happened to you, or you've got into a toxic pattern. One of those two.
So
And
how do we
that's-
heal? How do we, what are practical ways that we heal from trauma?
Okay, so what people are doing, which is very popular, and you mentioned this kind of earlier on, people are very aware of being mindful.
Yes.
Mindfulness is very popular, as
Yes,
you
it
kind of
is.
said it. Mindfulness in the sense of being aware, in the sense of being aware in the moment, in the sense of calming yourself down. That's excellent, but it's only step one. You have to go beyond mindfulness. You said it in the first episode. What next? Like what next? There's the chemical blanket, the diagnosis, but what next? Okay, so
Yeah.
what I found with my work, my research, myself, my patients, and I worked in South Africa. I don't know if you're aware. I come from South Africa, and I worked
Yeah.
for 25 years in some of the worst parts of South Africa,
Wow.
in where people were traumatized, raped, abused, AIDS victims, victims of apartheid, like a trauma like you cannot believe. So I had to go in with something that was very simple, very practical. And I also work with people, even my practice, in very traumatic situations, also with severe learning disabilities and severe traumas, dementias and ADHD, and which doesn't actually exist. Learning disabilities, the correct version, traumatic brain injuries. So I really worked with extreme populations, as well as working with all of us, which is all of us, the human condition, all of us. So when I say in my practice, okay, let me rephrase that to show you, to simplify this. Sorry, I got a bit carried away there with too much information. I worked with extreme situations to show you that this technique has worked in extreme conditions, but it also works with all of us. So
Yeah.
there are people that are in extreme conditions. Not everyone is in a war. Not everyone is in whatever situation. We all
Yeah.
have different experiences. So I had to find something about the mind and the brain and the mind-brain connection that worked for everyone, including me. Okay, as being a mother, a wife, and being able to help people. And that's where I decided to study the mind-brain connection and the science of thought and develop all my theories and work around that. And essentially, we've got to go, there's 5 steps. I mean, it's literally 5 steps that your brain goes, your mind does, that makes your brain come right. And those 5 steps are steps that I've built into all my work, all my books. I'm doing a whole clinical trial about them now. I've got an app that's coming out and it's got many parts to it, but the basic core steps involve being mindful, being aware, taking responsibility. But those are big words. So being mindful, what is it actually?
Yeah.
It's gathering awareness. It's simply gathering awareness of what am I thinking about? Having the courage to face myself and to look at myself and think, okay, why am I irritated right now? Or
That's
why am I
good.
frustrated right now?
So
or why am I
being
upset
mindful
right now?
of that emotion, of that
Exactly.
thought.
And then, exactly that, linking it to the body. You said you got vocal nodules, little bumps on your vocal cords, and you said something very insightful that was your anxiety that caused that, the mind-brain connection. It is so true. Our minds literally change our physical structure. Our minds are building right now at 400 billion actions per second. Our minds are making little computers in our brain, billions of them, at the speed of 400 billion actions per second and faster to hold these words. Those little things, those little protein computers in our brain control all 75 to 100 trillion cells of the body. So what I'm saying in English is that every thought, I know that's a lot to process. So what does it mean? It means that your thoughts control every single thing physically about you.
That's beautiful.
So when you send so what would happen in your case, and I mean the vulnerability you showed, tremendous admiration. Well done for saying what you said, because your insight there was outstanding, okay? So what you did was generate this energy from the anxiety. From the anxiety is just the symptom, as I've been saying. So there was something deep down inside, and that toxic energy was quantum energy moving through your brain, messing up the chemical energy in your brain, messing up the chemical energy in your blood. And the thing you used the most, which was your vocal cords, got this constant pounding of toxic energy, which then created an abrasion. You would have used your vocal cords incorrectly, and it would have created nodules, because nodules are just basically when the vocal cords hit, as you know. Okay, I did part of my training was voice. I had to do voice therapy and all that kind of stuff, so I know all about that too. So basically, that's what you did. You literally, and now that's not blaming you or making you feel bad or anything. You actually took ownership. You became aware. You did step 1. You became aware, and you then started going to step 2 without even being aware of it. And step 2 is the deep reflection about asking and answering and discussing with yourself, okay, why do I have this anxiety? Once the pills, the diagnosis, this is still in my life. So what? And I'm telling you, that's not just one tree you found probably 50. And then there's another one, and then this branch you realize is that and that and that and that. And we see like a tree grows branches, and how branches are in a forest connected to other trees, in a jungle, they're all kind of the weeds.
So you start to discover what was connected to.
Yeah, you start seeing the connections, and then you start seeing, that pattern, and that is the lifelong journey. So that reflection is step number 2. Step number 3 is the verbalization of this, the actual putting words to this, and that's where writing is very powerful, because it creates a cognitive organization in the brain, a fluency in the brain. It forces the brain to kind of get ordered. It brings order out of chaos. So the third step is to bring order out of chaos via adding words and descriptions and sentences and writing the stuff down. The fourth step is to actually then bravely look at what you have found and not to be scared. I always tell people to stick that information visually in your mind into a building. So here you're doing this, I'm aware of this thing. I am thinking about this thing. I am verbalizing and writing down this thing. But I'm not this thing, because that's not who you are, that's who you are.
Good.
So you take that thing and you stick it in this big building with all these windows.
So how do they do that?
In your mind. So imagine now, if you close your eyes now, right now, just visualize a big, huge building and see this issue inside there, and it's sealed. It's one of those windows that's sealed, and you on the outside, you're in love, you're immersed in God's love, you're immersed in a safe space, you're safe, you're immersed in your true identity, your perfect you nature, the resilience of your mind, the powerful mind. You do not have a spirit of fear, but you have a spirit of love and power and soundness. That is the design of your brain, that's the design of your body, that's where you stand. So what you do is you objectify the situation. So that's not me, that's what I've done, it's a failure, so what? It's an incorrect reaction, so what? I'm not going to let that throw me.
That's good.
I've learned 1,000 things like Thomas Edison about why that's not a failure.
And that kills the power of guilt.
Kills the power of guilt, absolutely.
Yeah.
It also brought this in the light. No longer is this down here, it's up here. The drugs put it down there. The scriptures as magic potions put it down there. The guilt kept it down there. This is now brought it up here. Now I can do something. Now I can say, okay, you're going to live in that window of that house over there. You're going to stay in that. I'm going to put it down like this.
And then I'm walking away from you.
Exactly. So I'm aware. I am aware. I am reflecting. Ask, answer, discuss. I am not going to keep this in me or on me. I'm going to put this in there. I'm going to verbalize, write that down. I'm going to look at this, but from a safe space, and then I'm going to have a little active action, some kind of what can I do today to help me deal with that element. Maybe this branch I dealt with today, and then maybe that branch tomorrow. So
and what do you mean by that? Like when it's an action, so
it's a little action, like so then whatever you've discovered in that process I've just described, and by the way, this process you can do in 7 minutes, literally. You take 7 minutes. You take like one, it's 5 steps, and you spend about a minute and a half
and
with
that
each.
is what you discuss in the 21-day
brain detox, which is in this book here. And then I also explain it in my latest book. I explain it from a building perspective, the same 5 steps. I use how to build your brain, which is an essential part of mental health. And then I have an app coming out called the Switch app, which is in the final stages of production now. And that literally on your phone, while you're at the gym, whatever, 15.
You can take the time.
It takes you through, and I build you through a process over 21 days, times 3, 63 days. What we don't realize is that it takes 21 days to build a long-term memory. It takes 63 days to full minimum to build a habit.
Wow.
Habits, and that's daily, consistent. So
and we've been taught that it takes 21 days to change a habit.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. It takes, you can't. And most people, by the way, most people give up after about 4 days. Most people, if you look at the research, 3-4 days. That's why the goals are so bad, because we set this goal and we just cannot achieve this goal quick enough. So we change the goal, we change the goal, we change the goal. But this is a process I'm talking about. I'm talking about a process of 5 steps that you are actually taking. So what I taught my patients to do, what this does, what the app does, is it's 7 to 15 minutes a day that you deal with a toxic issue. You don't deal with it after that in the day. The only thing you do after that in the day is you take step number 5, which is a little exercise, which could be something as simple as each time I say if only. Maybe I worked on that, was one of my most recent thoughts that I was working on. I used to always say, if only I did it this way. I don't know if any of you guys do that. And then I would torment myself. So I would, so if during the course of a day for my little active reach, I would put it in my phone. On the app, there's a little thing where it pops up, and it pops up during the day, and I keep it up there for the day. And it's practice your if only today, or if you come up with if only, capture that and immediately stop it.
And that is that action
That's the
that's
action.
being taken.
Or it could be you sing a little song, or it could be imagine a flower.
Yeah.
It could be, generally your active reach will come out of the process as you do the 5 steps that morning. There'll be some little logical, okay, today all I'm going to deal with is this tiny little thing, the thing with goals is that people want to make a big, huge splash, and that's not going to have sustainability. Sustainability comes from the tiny changes every day over time. And after 63 days, you have actually reconceptualized, rewired, turned that toxic tree, which is in the building, into something that's manageable, into the healthy green
And I
one.
love it, because even in your Switch on Your Brain, you talk about how it doesn't even end at the 63 days. That takes away that goal mindset where it's just a lifestyle of what you do.
It's a lifestyle, because that's going to then, from that, will generate, and we all have done this. Oh, well, I thought it was if only. Actually, that was only one part. So then you do another 63 days and another 63 days, and that's the lifelong journey. It's the lifestyle.
2 things I really picked up from what you shared. One, when you talked about mindfulness, it made me, I was reminded by the scripture, as a man thinks, so is he.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's
out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. All
science
those things.
revealing the word of God.
Exactly.
But also, Amber, when you were talking about medication, and you were talking in regards to, as we were talking about just the different, like the numbness and medication, and how, like with brain damage that it causes.
Which can heal, by the way.
Yeah,
this process of
that's
just
what I
describes
wanted
healing,
to bring
and I want
up.
to reassure
that
everyone,
even with
it
the
heals.
brain damage, like no matter how far a person is, that it's this
renewing of the
no
mind
matter
changes.
how severe it is, it heals the mind.
It heals.
That's
the
beautiful.
mind is being healed. The mind is being renewed. And as you're renewing the mind then puts that energy through the brain. So energy is not something scary. Without energy, there would be no lights in this room. There would be no production today. There would be no energy, be all dead. So energy is what is basically flowing through our body and flowing and keeping the world going around.
Because even as we talk about overcoming trauma, one of the things that I love that you said was that forgiveness is one of the main keys to overcoming trauma. And Amber, I want to ask you, why do you think that? Because I've noticed that forgiveness is a huge topic in life. If you ever ask someone, I don't know, this is just my scientific research by Stephanie, but I find it interesting that majority of people deal with offense. Majority of people deal with hurt, deal with unforgiveness. In the industry, is that something that you commonly see where unforgiveness is a big thing, and why do people struggle with forgiveness?
I think forgiveness is just a big issue in general, and it has a lot to do with how you shaped and formed your identity a lot of times, and a lot of us shape and form our identity as victims, because it justifies what happened to you when you can say that person did this to me, and now I react this way, again taking the responsibility out of your actions because this person did A, B, and C. Now I can do D. And forgiveness is it's one of the things that I really had to work through, because no, it wasn't your fault. you know, and you're dealing with what it is that you're dealing with. But like I said, my trauma was my responsibility. So now I have to do what I need to do to move forward in my life, because that person is...
You control that reaction.
that person's gone.
That's it. You control that reaction.
Yeah, they're gone. And I couldn't put it that way, but
that's what you were essentially doing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, scientifically, basically, there's a principle in quantum physics called entanglement. And all that means is the most logical thing. We're all connected. Everything, all humanity is connected. That is how we are designed. Love connects us as humans. And in quantum physics, if two particles are pushed apart by thousands, I mean, they pushed apart very, very far apart. If one turns this way, the other one will immediately turn that way. Einstein used to call this basically a ghostly action at a distance kind of thing. What it means essentially with forgiveness is that you are still entangled. If someone hurt you and you are then still thinking about that, you are still connected. You are still, they spin that way, you spin that way. Yep. They jump this way, you jump that way. So there's a puppet connection. So by forgiveness...
A puppet connection, wow.
There's the marionette, you're being played. So therefore, when you forgive, you cut the strings. So it doesn't excuse what the person has done to you, because what they've done is wrong, but they've got to deal with that. It's not for you to fix them.
Yeah.
It's for you to deal with your reaction, or you're going to be a horrible person. That's quite frankly, forgiveness, keeping that unforgiveness makes you bitter. Yep. Bitter makes, and you cannot hide it. No matter how much you think the person that's irritating you, or the person's whatever, that it's connected.
Because again, that thought is real in your mind.
It's real, and it's generating energy, it's generating that connectedness. So forgiveness does create the disentanglement.
No, I think that even when we just continue this conversation on forgiveness, I always wonder, because, okay, let's say, for example, in the church, you know, we talk about forgive and forget and things like that. But I do believe that forgiveness goes beyond the commandment, because again, it's dealing with, when you talk about how everything, our actions are produced by our thought life. And so there has to be a change of perception about the person or what they did. And we may not understand why that happened in particular. You never understand why that happened. But I do believe that how we perceive their actions is what ought to change, because when God says, you know, forgive as a commandment, it's almost like that commandment is coupled by some form of revelation about life. And, you know, in one of the things that I experienced when I was, I was probably like my early teens, or maybe 12 or something like that. So my father was murdered. And we then realized, I think I was about 11 or 12 or something like that, that an uncle of mine, who I was very close to, was the person that orchestrated his death.
Oh my gosh.
That he sent assassins to, you know, murder my father. And when that came up, I was like, what? What just happened? Because this was an uncle who was very close to me. And it was interesting because at that stage, I felt almost as though God was showing me how he views things and how he perceives things. And so I never had any resentment in the moment. And it bothered me, because I was like, God, I want to be angry. I want to be angry for my mother, because my mother is broken and she's crying. And I'm like, why am I not angry? It feels like this is not even my natural emotion. It feels like you're doing something here. And as I prayed concerning it, and what he spoke to me about was that it was almost like he was teaching me that for me to hold anger against him was to hold a truth about him to hold an idea about him that's not true. And he said, your uncle did not kill your father. Jealousy killed your father. And I find that fascinating, because when you talk about the different steps in healing, that at a point, I believe it's step 4, where you disconnect yourself with the toxicness, where you say, I am not what made me toxic. I am not that. And I think that when we start perceiving people that way, that yes, you hurt me, but what hurt me is not the true version of you. What hurt me is not the highest version of you. Because one thing God said to me that stuck with me for the rest of my life was that no one will ever hurt you from a place of love or from a place of wholeness.
Which is that perfect you nature.
Which is the perfect you nature.
For love.
Exactly. So I think that even when we talk about forgiveness, that I think it's very difficult for people, because either we're trying to understand why they did it, and understanding why they did it from the mindset of that is who they are.
Exactly.
Why are
And from your
you that way?
perspective.
And
You
your
can't get in their
perspective, you
head.
can't get in their head. And so we react now in this state of bondage, because even when we recognize the bondage we're in, we still we blame, we still point the finger and say, you put me in this bondage, you made me like this. But I do believe that when we start to perceive it differently, that revelation unlocks our ability to say, you know what, I've hurt people too. I have been the cause of someone's pain, the same way you're the cause of my pain in this moment. And when I realized that I was not my brokenness, I was not my toxicness, I was not my dysfunction, we should apply that to the lives of other people.
That's very, very good. That's very good, because you actually then, what you're doing is you're not giving that toxic energy the power. Because whatever you think about the most will grow. You're keeping entangled. So if that person, let's say that your uncle, I don't know if he's still alive or not, but let's say that he's, okay, so wherever he lives, it may be far away, it may be close, but let's say he lives 10,000 miles away. If you still harboring the bitterness, and you'll feel that pain inside of you. When we have unforgiveness towards someone, you can feel it in your body. Your body acts as, we have these things called discomfort zones in our bodies, which are physical reactions that our body has like alarm bells to warn us that something that we must become aware, something's not right. So with forgiveness, when we're not forgiving, our alarm systems in our body will go off. And if we keep that, our body will break down. So we will get illness in our life. So our own bodies will get physically ill, our mind will be affected.
Wow.
So forgiveness is a protective, and this is not selfish, it's basically a protective factor for you physically. It's not excusing the other person's behavior, because that's not justifiable. What that person's done to murder someone out of jealousy is not something that's right. But that's not something that you can carry as a burden. And unforgiveness is a burden that we carry, and it's toxic, and it's breaking down the brain and the body. So when we can get that in our mind, it goes along with you change your perception. You don't understand what they've done is wrong, jealousy is wrong, murder is wrong, but you can't get in that person's head because there's a bunch of reasons behind all of that, and but that's just something you can't really deal with. That's that person's issue. And I think when we don't forgive, what we're doing is keeping it. And scientifically, that's what you are. There's an invisible thread between that toxic thought and that person. When they think about you, the marionette's happening, the puppet's happening, that energy is now pouring into you. Think of the energy thing. That's toxic energy from that person that you haven't forgiven. You've kept a pathway open. Literally, and that's what scientifically happens. That's what quantum physics shows us. And that's what people that teach on quantum physics and the quantum physicists themselves will say, key issue about quantum physics is love and forgiveness.
Wow.
And we have to, as humanity, its ability to choose is basically what quantum physics is. So there's one of the most fundamental sciences that is teaching and showing us the most fundamental of principles, which is forgiveness and love.
That is beautiful. I actually want to read, there's something you shared in your book on forgiveness, and I want to just read that a bit. And this is Think, Learn, Succeed, and it's on page 70. And you said that we are often told to forgive and forget the wrongs that we suffer, but it turns out that there is scientific truth and gut logic behind the common saying. Research shows that the details of a transgression are more susceptible to being forgotten when the transgression has been forgiven. I find that fascinating, because we often say that, well, I can forgive, but I'm not going to forget.
Well, you remember what happened to your dad. You're never going to forget that.
Yeah,
so you're not forgetting in terms of the blanket, the Jesus blanket, the numbing thing. But what you're doing is you are kind of disassociating, forgetting that terrible trauma of the pain. So this thing has been reconceptualized, and you've changed. So that toxic has become. So even there's the tree. That's not that it's a happy tree. It's a sad tree that your dad was murdered by your uncle. That's very traumatic. But it's been reconceptualized as something that's now, the truth is that you've disconnected. You're not going to absorb it into your system. You're not going to let it affect your life. And you're going to disconnect from them so they can't pour more toxic energy into you. And then that's when we now release them into God's hands, into love, to actually, hopefully they will then identify what they did wrong and get themselves right, because otherwise they're pouring more poison out on others. But if we're so absorbed and caught up in that terrible pain, And we're not forgetting, and what we're supposed to forget, to answer your question, is we're supposed to forget the toxicity.
Yeah.
We're supposed to remember the
hold that
concept,
it had on
the
you.
hold. We forget
That's what
that.
you forget.
That is what you're forgetting. You don't ever forget what
Yeah, because
happened.
you have the memory of it.
Yes,
but
you
the
forget
the negative
exactly,
impact
and
is
that's right.
Yeah.
And you know if you've still got it because you'll get that.
yeah.
You know if you still got it.
I always felt like that phrase was more of an attitude. You know what I'm
That's
saying?
good.
Toward it.
Like you don't treat the person based on
or saying I'll forgive but I won't forget is still you holding on to it.
It is still holding on to it.
It's still you holding on to it. But saying I forgive and I forget, it's giving it away. And that's it. It's more I feel like it's more of like an attitude that it's not mine. I'm not owning what it is.
You're not owning that pain. You're not owning that trauma. That's the other person.
Because
you're
when we
forgetting that.
actually verbalize that, we still want control.
Yes.
Exactly.
Like when we use those phrases and say, "Well, I'll forgive. I'm not going to forget." So we want control of that situation. So we haven't really forgiven.
Exactly. So when you forgive and forget, you've really disentangled. You still remember the situation, but you've forgotten that pain. You've forgotten that all the negative toxicity that surrounds that particular concept.
Yes. That's
So
beautiful.
that's what you're forgetting.
That's beautiful. And what would you say is the power of perception? Because I know in your book you talk about how perception, how we perceive things, has the ability
For us
to
to
create.
succeed. It pretty much your perception will determine the success of your life. It's pretty much built around your. So basically, like you take the example of forgiveness, in the situation with your uncle, if I may, that situation, your perception shifted from being one of this is terrible pain that I've experienced, but because of the forgiveness, you've reshaped and changed your perception. You're looking at it differently. So perception goes along with reconceptualization, where there's a new way of viewing it. And it's a freedom way of viewing it. It's looking at it from another angle. And that angle is looking at it from love. And love then is allowing that issue, that situation, that person to find the healing that they need so that they don't perpetuate that same kind of pain. So it's a reconceptualized look. It's a redesigned look, the shift of perception.
Yeah. So even as we talk about perception, Amber, I'll start this question with you. Have you ever experienced, maybe even just with people, about holding on to what they categorize as a mental illness based on a gene or based on it being hereditary, that their mother dealt with this, their grandmother dealt with it, and so by nature or by biology they have to deal with it? That perception, I'd like to...
I definitely have heard people say, it's hereditary or it runs in my family or whatever the phrasing is. But even for myself, actually, I had to change my perception of what I was dealing with in order to arrive to where I am right now. And that can be really hard. It can be because the things that are spoken over you or the things that you speak feel like your reality. And so when you try to change your perception, sometimes in your mind you can think, okay, I'm in denial. I'm in denial of what's actually happening when what's actually happening isn't reality. So shifting your perspective, and it was a healthy shift. Changing my perspective was actually healthy for me, which was crazy for me to be like, no, I have anxiety, I have this disorder, and this is why this is happening, because you feel like you're understanding what's actually happening in your body, but nothing is getting better. So you actually don't. But yeah, perspective, changing my perspective is what started the journey. And I think it'd be tough for people, and maybe a tough pill to swallow, because you now have started a different journey, and sometimes it feels like starting over. You're starting from square one, and the journey is harder. But I'm now taking better steps to getting better, as opposed to my other perspective was, I just gotta get through it. I just gotta get to work. I just gotta get through work.
And just that's right. That's
along the way,
and I'm literally doing this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Back and forth. That creates tremendous. That increased your feelings of anxiety, would have led to panic attacks.
But if I changed my perspective, which changed my trajectory, if I stopped doing this and I just turned and went this way, pathway is clear. Now I can, now I
you
can
can
go
see.
where I can go.
So what you did there was you were looking at your life through this diagnosis. If you look at your life through this is your perspective, this is your view, and it's toxic. So, and yours happened to be, okay, I've got an illness. Already you were suffering. Now you get told you have this brain disease, which doesn't even exist, but you didn't know that maybe till you, as you said, you read my work. But so you've got this model in your mind, this perspective that I'm sick, I'm anxious, I've got this disease. And that perspective blocked you. But you changed your trajectory, you picked that one up, and you said, okay, no, this is not the case. I can actually control this, and you put on a different view. So perspective is a view, and when you have that view, it causes tremendous damage inside your brain and your body, and it makes it really hard to physically function.
Yes.
You lose your energy, you feel physically that your physical body will increase symptoms of depression. Whereas that, you still got the same issue. You haven't fixed anything yet, but your perspective has shifted you. So your mindfulness, the first step, your awareness of that's the wrong perspective, you shifted to that. Now you're looking at life through that. Suddenly your brain responds and different energy flows, different neurotransmitter combinations flow. You activate genetic switches that now increase your resilience. So now you're easier to just be around, and it's easier, you're more receptive, you're hearing things, you're very blocked in the zone, we're very open in that zone. So a whole lot of scientific stuff is happening in your brain and your body with your decision, with your mind there. So that brings me to the perspective of what you were saying about the genetic component, the hereditary component. There is no scientific basis for saying that it is hereditary.
Wow.
There's no gene, there's no neurobiological basis for mental illness, because mental illness doesn't exist.
Yeah.
What we have is trauma exists, suffering exists. That's very real, and that is hard and that is tough, as we keep on saying. So therefore what they've spent billions of dollars is trying to find the neurobiological correlates in the brain to say, okay, if you've got that kind of pattern in your brain, then this is why you're doing it. But just a recent study came out of Yale telling us that there is no normal brain, because we're all completely unique. So basically that perspective is incorrect. We can't see the hereditary side because it's not scientific. It doesn't exist. What we have is an epigenetic factor. So yes, there can be a pattern of depression in the grandmother, the mother and the grandmother.
And the epigenetic factor, how do you...
What we're seeing is what we call epigenetics. Epi meaning over and above the gene. So the genes have got like a little switch on the outside. It's a little chemical switch, and that has to be activated to activate the gene. And what switches all that physical stuff on is your thinking. So thinking makes everything work in your body. No thinking, no body working. When
So
you
what
die,
you're saying is that, because you just mentioned that the way we think, the way we think can be passed through the sperm and the ova.
Yes.
So it creates, because I know in your book you call it creates a predisposition.
It creates a predisposition.
But it doesn't create destiny.
No, it doesn't create destiny. So what happens is that toxic thought can be something that's coming through that wasn't dealt with in maybe 4 generations back. So they saw a pattern in the family that was leading to
like anger
depression,
something.
Yes, something like that. So a pattern in the family, but that pattern is physically represented because we create that out of mind. So the thinking of the person 4 generations back switched on the gene. They switched on the epigenome, which is the little light switch, which switched on the gene, which made the thought, didn't get dealt with, passed through the sperm and the ova to the next generation, didn't get dealt with, got activated. Oh, my mother's depressed or my father's depressed, and that's what happens in our family, so that's me. So then we activate
So
that.
by just even believing that,
Just thinking it
activates it.
Seeing it in your environment,
Wow.
seeing in your environment. So it comes through your sleep, zipped up. But by you observing a parental reaction or a life, your upbringing, activates it if you absorb it. If you say, oh, well, that's just how our family is, that unzips and activates. Or you can say, I'm not going to do that. This is not going to be for my life. I'm going to destroy. So you can say this is, and you go through those 5 steps over 63 days and you destroy that. You literally break that pattern down. So there is a fact of it passing
So there's a
through.
scientific guide to literally what Christians would define as, breaking generational curses.
That's what they were talking spiritual language. In scientific
in
language,
scientific, you can literally...
there's a physical zipped up thing that's gone through. So it's not a gene that's hereditary that you can't control. And it's not automatically going to happen, but the predisposition is there, but it doesn't have to happen because you still control your life. So you activate because it's asleep. It has to be woken
and
up.
it's only activated by how you think. So the responsibility comes back
exactly.
to you.
And if you activate it because that's you're a child and you don't know any better and you're activating that thought pattern, but as you become more aware and able to control, you realize, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
I don't want that in. And that's enough for you, that's the correct thinking quantum energy that will go and destroy that thing. Those switches will switch off and the thing won't have energy anymore, and you pull the plug and it starts dying. That's literally what's happening.
Wow.
So you change that. That's
what I really love about this, and I think even a place to land this conversation and to wrap it up is in talking about the practical ways to heal. There has to be a sense of determination where that so it begins by, in part when we talked about awareness, having the awareness that I don't have to stay this way. My life is not hopeless. There is hope for me to change. I can live my best life. Cues the song.
there you go. Oh, sorry.
No problem. But that in the midst of that, there has to be a sense of determination. And I think that determination,
self-regulation.
Yeah. And one of the things I believe drives that is self-esteem, and that us seeing ourselves the right way, us seeing ourselves, our identity, how we view ourselves. Because if we can view ourselves to know that we can be better, to know that I deserve to live my best life, then we are motivated to be determined to do the work.
Exactly.
That we enjoy doing the work. And Amber, even what you shared is so powerful because it has a message of determination and understanding that there is a version, there's a higher version of you on the other side of this, and the moment you began that process, you tapped into that perfect you. And so I really love this conversation. And
so
just to wrap it up, I want us to close in prayer. And Amber, I would love for you to pray over everyone watching who is believing that, I can be better. I like this is not the end for me. Yeah.
Lord, I thank you for this time that we had together. I pray for anyone that's watching that feels that they want to change their perspective of what's going on in their life. I pray that you would help them arrive to the right answers to start that journey. I pray that they will not fear a better version of themselves, and they will understand that they can live their best life and have joy and have peace and have all of the things that you think for us, Lord. And I pray that they won't run away from it. I pray for this time together, that it will be fruitful and there will be a major, amazing change in this generation because of this discussion and this time. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. That was beautiful.
Thank you, girl. It was great.
So good.
So good. Thank you.